16th, 2019 at about 2:03 p.m. And if we could just do roll call, starting with Marcia. Please say your first and last name.
Marcia Maldives.
Libby Stiff.
Dick Byrne.
Cheryl Crow.
Thank you all for being here. I have heard from Bob that he is out of town, and hopefully Ray will join us. And we're fortunate to have one guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Enid LaCree.
Nice to have you here, Enid. Is there a specific topic that you hope to speak to today?
No, I'm not speaking, I'm just here.
Very nice. Great to have you with us. Thank you for being here. We will move right into the agenda, and I do have minutes going back to April 30th. And you've all seen these.
Yeah, I got
And
them.
thank you to Marcia, our secretary, for taking them. Do you need a minute to look at them and refresh?
Move to approve. Can I do that? Because I wrote
Yes, you
them.
may.
Refresh.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any comments, discussion on the minutes from April 30th? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We'll get a copy to Ann here shortly. I have no correspondence since our last meeting. So has anyone else received correspondence? Ann, anything that's come to you that I wouldn't know about? Okay, thank you.
Just questions about the, patio business.
Okay, well, let's get into
When it comes up.
the old business, and we'll touch on that as it comes up. Our city website, I believe, is up to date. So there, I have nothing to discuss on that unless anyone has anything to bring up. We've included a number of things. Chris has been very cooperative with us in getting things up quickly and efficiently. And we feel that it's much more informative than it was a year ago even. And thank you, Cheryl, for that.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to spend a little time taking a look at the city animal code
Sorry, guys.
again, and what my intention, and I hope this works out, is that we can go through this today. If there's any needed discussion, we'll have that. And then the next meeting will be with the city solicitor to show him where we're at with this, and then take his advice and do with that as we need to. And then probably bring it back here one more time, and then share it with the commissioners and the mayor and the city manager, and get their input. And then once we have that, we can go to them for approval. So I've asked Cheryl if she would walk us through this. Do you have a copy, Marcia? No
I do.
doubt.
I didn't bring it.
Libby
I
has-
can look
Libby
over
has
my
3 or 4
shoulder.
copies on her kitchen counter, just waiting to be.
Well, I will say the good news is nothing changed
Need
since
to
the last
bring
time we met.
Yeah.
I know the last meeting that we discussed code, we had, the meeting before had really skimmed down a lot of the potential additions and changes just to keep things simple. And the majority of the changes are actually omissions of old and dated language or resources that are no longer available. So that's the good part, is we're not coming back again with any really complex additions or changes. The majority of the changes, like I mentioned, are nominal, where we are changing Delaware SPCA to Brandywine Valley SPCA, and updating some definitions for things that we had neglected to address in the past. So we can certainly walk through this. I'll be relatively quick with it. That way, we're not really belaboring wording and things like that once again. And I think we're at the point where, like Dick mentioned, it is ready to go on for review to the city solicitor. We've discussed some of these changes and some of these additions. They are, again, mostly definitions, but we did make room for some language regarding leashes and types of tethers and confinement for animals. So I guess we'll just start on the very first page, and I don't know if, I'm certainly not going to read everything word for word in this go-around, but I'll mention some of the things that we had discussed. So on page 1, we just basically changed the wording for animal control officer, considering that's a statewide service now, so it comes all through Office of Animal Welfare and Animal Services. We did include some language just mentioning, because the city of Rehoboth Beach does have our wonderfully active city officers that do react if needed, so we wanted to make room for them to be mentioned, along with state police. We revised the definition that was in place for leash. It's no longer just a cord, it's a hooked or fastened cord, and we changed the exceeding foot limit to 6 feet from 8 feet for a safety precaution. And again, added some amended language for what constitutes a leash. We did define tethering as a permanent perpetual securing of an animal by a chain rope cord, not to include a leash for walking. So to clarify that for some language about tethering of animals. We did revise the definition of an owner as a person owning, servicing as a custodian, or possessing a dog, cat, or other animal. And we did, after a prior discussion, add the definition of a service animal through the ADA. So that concludes any changes or additions on page 1. Page 2 was more omissions than not. At one point, there was an animal control officer appointed by the mayor. We struck that and kind of moved some things around and made a section for livestock and fowl, which will be moved from page 2 to the very end, where the remainder of other animal language is. Let's see what else. We omitted the section for 88.5, which talks about housing conditions of animals, because it specifically references goats, sheep, hogs, and other livestock, which is no longer valid in the city of Rehoboth. And we also moved the noisy animal section portion to another area where we reference nuisance animals or nuisance noises. And those were pretty much the remainder of the changes for page 2, other than clarifying a valid state license tag under 88.7 and moving the harboring for reward of stray or stolen dogs, cats, or other animals. We moved that to a section where lost and found pets were listed. Page 3, which picks up at 88-10, vicious dogs, cats, or other animals. The only changes here were referencing Office of Animal Welfare and Delaware Animal Services as opposed to the city, any references to the city. As we move down to the bottom, we struck dangerous dogs or other animals, just that specific section that references dog, cat. There's another section for that in the following pages. We struck female dogs in heat. Unfortunately, that's kind of irrelevant in terms of what we are trying to narrow code down to address. So that's additional language not needed.
Cheryl, let me just stop you for a second. So if you have any comments, please raise them, or questions. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
sorry,
know.
that's why I'm trying to go fast.
I know.
Most of this is redundant, we've heard
we've
it.
done this, but
Right.
Right, and
I
this
just
is.
want to do due diligence
Yeah,
to
but
this
I'm not
before
a
we
young
move
woman.
it.
I'm not a young woman.
Yeah, I will talk as fast as I can. And for reference, for anyone who's interested, these are all things that we have discussed in detail, in much detail before. So upon making notes from comment from the remainder of the committee, that's where these changes are coming from. So again, it's designed to be more concise. So on the 4th page of 10, we look at section 88-14, injury to property and nuisances. We kept that the same. We mentioned language for a city leash law, which does exist. Changed seeing eye dog to service animal, and inserted a section where we could separately reference poop scoop law and a noisy animals section from before. we took out the Article 3 of impoundment of dogs because the city is not necessarily in the business of doing that. Now that we have Office of Animal Welfare and BVSPCA. However, the city may serve as a temporary holding facility for lost pets until the appropriate agency can respond. We had this discussion with Chief Banks in that, sometimes we know an animal belongs to someone in the city, and rather than go through the motions, we can hold it for a short period of time until that owner's located. Obviously, it's case, depends on the case. Dogs running at large, section 88-15. We kept this same, didn't necessarily change anything except for inserting some language about perpetual tethering. No dog shall be tethered at any time within 100 feet of any school, library, or child care center. We don't necessarily have that situation. I think the library is probably the only thing we can reference other than the school on Sussex Street. Is it Sussex? Yeah.
The preschool.
Right, exactly. So, I think that's language that is more preemptive than not. But again, we'll pass that on to the powers that be to decide whether that makes the grade. So we edited down the confinement language for anyone who's the owner or custodian of any dog within the city, which may include a fenced yard or enclosed pen. Again, referencing the poop scoop law and unattended tethering, which will likely call for greater discussion, all things considered. And then we get to the end of page 4, where dogs or other animals prohibited from the beach, section 88-16, moving on to the next page of 5 of 10. We didn't change that. We just left changed seeing eye dogs to service dogs. And then we recommended that this entire section should be renamed and sectioned under dogs at large. Authority to impound, no changes there other than this is the responsibility of the Office of Animal Control and Delaware Animal Services. Sections 88:18 through 88:20 we struck because it references impounding and reclaiming of impounded dogs and disposition of impounded dogs and claimed dogs. Again, that's shifted over to Office of Animal Welfare. Moving on to page 6 of 10, again, we're mostly striking some language. The remainder of that last section, 88:20, 88:21 and 22 is basically referencing lost or stray animals being delivered to the state agencies, and also keeping and not changing the language for rabies control and require immunizations. 88:23 and 88:24, this is examination of biting dogs or cats to determine rabies. That is clearly not the responsibility of the city of Rehoboth or anybody within, so we're going to keep that over to Office of Animal Welfare and Delaware Animal Services, along with confining an animal which has attacked or bitten a person. So really pulling out a lot of that excessive language there. Moving on to page 7, you'll be happy to know it's all omissions. 88:25, again, goes with examination of animals and confinement and bites, permitting the release of those animals that have been detained or taken in as strays. So again, not our problem, and it's easy for us to move that through and clear that out of our code to make room and make it more concise. Then we get to the cat section, which we know has been updated very, very recently. So I think we collectively decided there were no really necessary changes. So it's not broken, so we won't fix it. And then we move on to waterfowl, and in conversations with Ray, I think we just added some language about the public feeding of geese, ducks, and wildlife under intent 88-31 section B. Moving on to page 9, I think this was just some omissions. We're going to take away the effective date section at 88:34, that's invalid. And then we talk about trapping of dogs, cats, and other animals. Again, we define and provide information for the Animal Control Service, which again is the Office of Animal Welfare. And we added some language about trapping, because it is certainly not an issue, but it could possibly come up as an issue at some point. We just put a limit on how long an animal can be left in a trap to hopefully preempt any issues with animals that have been trapped and not released, leading to unfortunate circumstances. That was the only change from page 9, page 10 of 10, and we are done. No changes here with violations and penalties, enforcements and penalties. Nothing that we felt needed to be updated or changed. Enforcement, again, leaving it as it is. The only suggested or proposed insertion was to include some language regarding employees of the city of Rehoboth Beach that are or could be convicted of cruelty or abandonment of any animals otherwise guilty, and shall be prohibited from obtaining or maintaining any business license relative to and relating to the control, possession, supervision, or other activities involving animals. So if you work for the city and it's found that you're hurting animals, then you're not going to be allowed to do that any longer. Not had anything happen, but certainly don't want to get into a position where that could. There's other language that's a little more descriptive, so we will let that be. I think other than that, there may be some discussion with new business or other items that are going to bring up some other proposed additions. We had talked before about making some type of whether it belongs on the city website or whether it belongs in code, about natural disasters. And luckily enough, we've just really, I know we just started the hurricane season, but we've been lucky so far. But making it, developing language that during any and all emergencies, including a natural disaster, act of terrorism, or other event requiring evacuation or displacement, that no animal shall be left behind, within, tethered to, or inside of any shelter, or left outdoors and unattended within the city limits. I mean, we hope that happens all over the place, but that's the intent of this. Any citizen shall contact BVSPCA, DEMA, FEMA for instructions and options on appropriate animal sheltering during evacuation. The side note with that for the city website is obviously to list options for folks who need sheltering that allows pets. Resources for evacuation and emergencies can be found on the City of Rehoboth Beach website.
Cheryl, does the state have any language?
The state does not have language about not leaving pets behind.
Okay.
It actually, and I hate to be on record saying this, it does not really promote exhausting the option of taking your animal with you, which is unfortunate. But
okay. So I think on that item, we'll ask the city solicitor for his legal advice as to where should that information best go. Is it right now best on the website as advice and help to folks, or could it go into the code? I'm open to suggestions on that or advice, but I think he'll be the one that'll give us the best advice.
This goes to Glenn next.
Yes, yes. Now, the only other item that Cheryl did not bring up, and it's because I just asked her a week ago, and it's what the city should do with deceased animals, particularly deceased pets that are found on public property. And this comes from a sad situation that we had this last July, when through a set of circumstances, I ended up finally getting a phone call the evening after a pet cat, not a feral cat, a pet cat, had been hit and killed on Olive Avenue. It was, and ended up being a hit and run situation.
Oh, yeah, I did hear about that.
And so it was a hit and run.
But it was a pet feral cat.
The cat was left on the street, it died, and a neighbor saw it happen and called the local police, went to the door. The people that owned the cat were not at home, so called the local police. Police came and they, I I don't know if they moved it, I'm not sure of all of these details, I think they moved it maybe so the traffic would be just, it would be able to flow on Olive. And then they called the streets department, and they sent a guy over, and he picked up the dead cat, took it back, and ended up going into the city garbage, and then went off in the garbage. And he was following what he had been told was protocol and all that. Now he did, however, before he left the street with the body of the cat, he did clip off a collar and gave it to this neighbor. But there was no follow through with the owner. And so that all came to me quickly, and I did follow up immediately. I got the police report. I got a hold of the city manager. The city manager and I met the very next morning. She had already met with the employees, had talked about how we need a new protocol and that we have to do all we can to identify the owner, talk to the owner before we dispose of the body. So while it was very sad, people responded in helpful and positive kinds of ways. I got a hold of the two women that owned the cat, and of course they were extremely upset. They were very sad. They were angry at the city for not being able to get the body of their cat back. And so we had several conversations. The city manager and I both visited with one of the owners, and I also said that it would come to this committee, that we should have a policy, a written policy, not only a working policy that the city manager has with employees, but a stated policy of what happens, so that in the future there is some written protocol that people understand. And so with that, all of that said, and there's a lot of other details in there, but I think that's the gist of it. I asked Cheryl if she would put together something, and we don't have copies for folks. Okay, that's fine. No,
You have just one copy?
I'll pass mine
Were you
on.
rude enough to say, why were you letting the cat out?
Because
Yes.
it's a feral cat.
that was part of, yes.
It's part of it.
And so you're right, indeed there is an ownership responsibility. And so it's
Have to
not just on the
inspect it if
city,
they're
it's
feral.
not just on the employee, it's not just on this committee. There's a huge responsibility on an individual that lets an animal out of their house to go roam. And after several days and a few conversations with the owner of the cat, she said, indeed, I know I have a responsibility for this. And
What block of Olive, by the way?
Second block, I think by Gerard.
yeah, right across from, right,
Right across from the lake.
when you go right down from Bad Hair to beyond the triangle going east.
Going around the corner there, you know those women.
Yeah, so, everyone then kind of took on responsibility, and everyone was helpful at the end, saying, okay, we need to get beyond this incident, and what happens next time a dog or cat is hit and left in the street, or left, or is just found in public property even, and it's not one of our feral
The
cats.
cat had a collar on it.
Yes.
Identifying the owner?
I believe so, but I can't say 100%, but I
Which I
believe so.
don't believe they should be outside with a collar on anyway.
But the neighbor knew,
Right, then
But the
it
neighbor
essentially
knew.
makes it
the neighbor
everyone's
knew exactly
And
where,
she could have just as easily picked
where
the
the-
cat up
where
and
the
put it in her
cat came out.
freezer.
well, there's a number of things that could have happened. So the whole point is, what happens in the future? And, I just felt that this committee should take a look. So, you have it, good. So, Cheryl, we don't have to read this all out loud, but if you want to go over just a few highlights
Yes,
of this, and then my thought is that then we find an appropriate place to put
right.
whatever we agree on into here, and then again, it goes to the city solicitor to see
Right,
if
and
it's appropriate.
what I kind of put together was based on research for some other smaller municipalities, but also a combination of probably some things that should remain and go onto the City of Rehoboth website, and maybe a very small portion that would actually go into city code or some type of policy. So it basically outlines the procedure of what you should do if your pet has died, which basically is to contact your veterinarian, because the city of Rehoboth will not remove or claim any deceased pets from private property. There's an, if you do find a pet that's deceased, obviously the protocol is to call the Office of Animal Welfare, and then it's in their hands for what happens next, and they have their own protocol, obviously, for contacting an owner and how long they would hold a pet, and how they reach out to advertise a lost or found pet. The City of Rehoboth Beach Sanitation Department, now I'm sure there's probably another name for that, but in my draft, just to keep things simple, will pick up deceased pets from any streets. What we tried to implement in this proposal was to give a 24-hour window for them or the city police, or whatever other entity we kind of come up with, 24 hours to notify an owner. Whether that's in person, by phone, however that should work out. And then that way, the owner of the animal is responsible for having the body cremated, buried, disposed, however that works out. This isn't essentially, I think, a law, but I think it's kind of one of those things we all recognize as the right thing to do. But if we have to write it in code, we will. That any vehicle operator that strikes an animal should stop, unless stopping would endanger human life, render assistance, and report the incident to the animal's owner or the appropriate authorities. The other language that we included was that no deceased animal shall be placed into any private, public refuse container, garbage can, dumpster, or compost. Clear and cut. And then I think the next section just kind of moves on to injured wildlife, because it is kind of relevant that if someone found a dead goose or duck or rabbit, that they're obviously not blowing up the Office of Animal Welfare or city police, and there are there's contact information for the Delaware Division of Wildlife and appropriate resources. So
She's referenced Tri-State Bird Rescue.
Yep, exactly. And they are listed on our website, but I don't think it's a bad thing to be redundant in this
And
case.
for the marine mammals.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really it.
Yeah.
Try to keep it simple, certainly not reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, making it very clear what the expectations are for certain circumstances. So with that being said, I don't know if anybody has any input or questions or suggestions for that.
I think we're developing something big for something that happened once. I mean, seriously, if I go out in my yard and there's a dead squirrel, I'm supposed to call who? I'm putting it in the trash. I mean, that's...
Well, what triggered this was a pet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
Persons.
didn't get that. It talks about wildlife. It talks about what do you do when you're waiting for Myrrh to show up in 2 days with a dead shark. You read about that, with the shark in the garbage can, and everybody got upset.
So,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, that sort of thing would
dead's dead.
not go into our code. That sort of information is on the website.
I mean, and there's no
people.
rules saying you shouldn't,
Yeah.
but I mean, for somebody's pet, and I think it's not necessarily that action of putting it in the garbage can, it's notifying that owner, because in this case, the owner wasn't notified.
Well, it's okay, what are the city's plans? Because they pick up a cat that has a collar and it's dead. Are we gonna have a freezer for it, or where is it gonna go for 24 hours in the summertime?
Well, I don't know, but they have to figure that out. And, and without it being a written policy right now, that's the policy that
Right.
City
And it very
Manager
well-
Lynn laid out to the employees, that you will do your best to identify and contact the owner within a reasonable
Do your
amount
best.
of time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because
that's
if there's a name on it and a phone, that's pretty straightforward.
They could have
If it's
quickly
just
called Sharon and she could have run over and taken care of it.
Yeah, right. If it's just a dead animal and without any identifying, and then it becomes
And
very
everybody would
difficult
try
unless
to
there's
do
a
that.
unless there's a neighbor or somebody there that,
Everybody would try to do
Sure.
that, except that neighbor.
yeah. So,
So this is Sharon's suggestion?
well, the part that deals with what to do when a dead pet is found on a public roadway. Yeah.
Right, we can strike
the
all the
rest of it,
wildlife
we
if,
just-
if
we
we
just
feel
put
like it's
around it.
overkill.
So, I mean, what she's doing right now with her employees is essentially, they'll do their best
So that's it.
to identify and contact the owner and ask, do you want your dog or cat?
And if there's,
The remains, do you want the remains back?
getting the blood up off the highway, we're gonna make sure we get that too.
Well, you know, these guys that work our roads and our sanitation
They're wonderful
are
guys.
excellent.
They are the best guys.
And they do the absolute best they can do. And what they did in this instance was what essentially in the past they've been told to do, and that is, get the animal off the street so it does not cause any kind of a public safety hazard on the road. It doesn't slow down traffic. And, should they have tried to identify or contact the owner? Probably. But, it was in the course of their work that day too. I mean, it's not like they're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring, right?
Maybe we need an deceased animal agent.
Yeah. Libby, the volunteer deceased animal agent. Well, we will play with this, and I think we'll ask Glenn, city solicitor, for his advice.
And see what other people say.
Yeah, right. And maybe it doesn't go into the code,
Doing
maybe
the
it just,
best we can to be neighborly and helpful and kind is important.
and that's it, really. That's it.
Asking me to call them.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not gonna deal with the whale that washes up. Because that should all be
It should have gone to Purcell's.
on the website. And when that does come to the police and so on, they know, these other contacts, we hope.
I
Okay,
did object to how they were carrying it on the machine, though. I did. It was a shame.
okay, at this point, anything else on the city animal code? Cheryl, thank you so much for
Sure thing.
all that you've done. We'll continue to move this along. We will keep everyone up to date. The next item on the agenda is feeding wildlife, and more specifically, it did come to me not in written form, but numerous verbal reports, questions, concerns of many people on Turtle Bridge this summer, continuing to feed the turtles and the waterfowl, despite the signage that is on both ends of the bridge, and despite the fact that if you read the signage, then it becomes clear to people how harmful that is, not only for the wildlife, but also for the natural environment. And so it
Yesterday,
continues.
you heard the people after me saying they deliberately fed them, and they thought of me when they were doing it.
And I had a gentleman this summer who I talked to, I thought in a gentle, helpful way when he was doing it. And he behaved,
Verbally accosted.
Ungentlemanly.
he was not a gentleman in his response to me and then in his behavior.
Well, there was one family there, God bless them, they brought organic, special food that was designed for wild turtles and geese.
Oh, boy.
Mhm. Well,
I just let it go. I'm not getting into it with the whole family.
so, the kind of helpful suggestions that have come are, well, we could put little machines there, and for $0.25 or $1, you get a handful of turtle food or
It just,
duck food, but then that has to be maintained, it has to be.
but it will also
Yeah.
increase dependence.
Yes, and that's not what wildlife is all about, is being fed no matter whether it's healthy food or it's Wonder Bread. And so I have talked with the city manager about this, because she also heard several times during the summer of concerns about this situation.
Does the city
And-
ever monitor it?
Yes, and so there's two things that the city manager and I have talked about. And one is very obvious, and that is that during the season, on a much higher frequency, we'll have one of our summer officers riding his or her bike across the bridge, being in the park on either side, and taking a look and then reminding folks what the policy is. And so she's agreed that that can easily happen, and that will happen starting next season. The other thing that the city manager agreed that we could talk about, and what we could certainly do, and that is, if you think of the bridge, on either side, there's 4 vertical rungs that are 2x4s. And on the top one, you could put a little strip sign made out of a non-rust-proof kind of metal that says, "Please do not feed the wildlife," and right in the middle of the bridge. Because people said to me this summer, "Oh, I didn't really pay attention to the sign," and I think that's true.
I think that's true. I think
People walk out there, they don't look at
You're
signs.
walking over a bridge.
But if it says that right there where you're
And it's monkey see,
standing.
monkey do. If you see other
That's
people
not a
doing it,
bad
you're gonna do
idea.
it.
So is that a good idea? And Sharon said they'd be very willing to do that, try it. I mean, that'd be done for like, little or no expense. I mean,
Well,
that
I
can be
think
done in
we're-
our own sign shop here, and our guys can put it up.
I think we're in an evolutionary process where people are learning more about animals, and so hopefully, this will all,
Hopefully.
hopefully, before we die.
Right. And we have others, that are also very interested in this issue. I recently talked with Sally Foreman, and SOLA 3 has very big interest also in all of the freshwater lakes and not feeding, and they're happy to do anything they can do that'll be supportive. And so, okay, I don't know if we have to talk about it anymore. All right, good. A quick review of the TNR program over the last season. Marcia, do you have any updates?
Since we last met, nothing. Isn't that
Okay,
wonderful?
yeah. Was it a quiet summer?
Yes, it's been very quiet. We feed at Lake Gerard. There's a little area. We had a gosling with a fish hook in its neck. So I called Tri-State, and they said, because I had called Ray, and he was having his knee done.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Great time to have that done.
Yeah, when we needed it.
They didn't have anybody, so Bob got on his phone. We took our dog's crate, a big crate, and threw the cat food. The goose was interested. Stan grabbed it and put it in our car.
Wow.
Good for Stan.
That's
So
amazing.
Bob called, different people, and we got the Millsboro vet.
The
And
woman,
A man.
a man,
And he had called somebody, and so she met us there, and she took the gosling. And then they were I didn't realize geese will adopt anything that comes to them. But I said, I really like it back with its family, because they're not flying yet.
yes.
What a reunion. It was so neat. It had had surgery, and they had removed the hook and brought it back. They're all running at each other with their wings going. And then about 3 days later, they all took off flying. So it was just at that time.
How much did it cost you?
Just gas to get to Millsboro and home.
The vet did it?
Well, that's what Tri-State does.
Oh, Tri-State, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought it was just.
No local vets will,
No, the birds are, you can,
they'll euthanize, but they will not. I don't think they do anything with any wildlife.
well, it's a specialty, and now that the virus and vaccine places have closed, we don't have any chicken vets. We used to have lots of chicken vets that would help.
Sure.
So anyway.
But drawing blood from a bird, you can kill it.
Right. So anyway, we have
That's
no new
wonderful
cats.
of
I
you.
think last time I reported, we had a black cat, and that was adopted. So we haven't had any new.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's very good.
Let's keep it
news.
that way.
I haven't heard of any new. We've
I
had,
haven't seen a stray cat.
we've had a couple new ones across the canal, immediately across the canal landing, but Bob has been on top of that. Those folks
Right.
over there give him
We
a
know a
call
few
as
people
well.
over there that
Yeah,
do the trapping.
so they've been neutered, and they're back there, and they've
Right.
got a small colony, maybe 5 or 6 cats over there now. Okay, good, thanks, Marcia. New business, what could have been a very hot item on the agenda, I think has more or less taken care of itself, and that is the dogs on restaurant patio issue. We can all talk about this, but we all know that our representative, Pete Schwarzkopf, has introduced HB 275. He's done that in a bipartisan way. So the Democrats, Republicans, many of them up and down the state are together on this. That'll go onto the floor in January, and Pete says it'll be approved very, very
By summer.
quickly.
Right. That's cool.
It simply supports what we have thought was the status quo, and that is that owners of restaurants can determine whether or not they want to allow dogs on the beer garden area, the outside patio, and of course they have to be leashed, and the restaurant has to continue to live up to all of the quality sanitation standards that are required. So when this went on the agenda, as I told a couple of media people this morning, that we did not know for sure about HB 275, and had we known, it wouldn't be a discussion, and they wanted to come in here today and see that we were going to do something else. And I said, I think we're just going to be supportive of the direction the state is going. But
Common sense.
It's me.
Okay, good. Suggestions for future agendas, and one thing that we kind of briefly introduced some time ago, that Cheryl had brought to me and we put on an agenda just to introduce, was this concept of pet-friendly city. That there's a foundation of I think the Mars company, if I remember correctly, that can designate and certify a community as a pet-friendly. And I just think in the future we should take a look at that again. I don't know if it's something we absolutely want to do, but I think we should take a look at what the requirements are and what would be the benefits to the city.
And I think some of the revisions and revisiting is really aligned with those application requirements. We fit into it very well from the beginning. So I think going back and streamlining our city code and updating the website and really putting that information out there and being a resource will really help move that along.
I want to ask you a question as a realtor. More or less are the same requests for pet-friendly houses? Has it leveled out, or?
I think it's consistent. Back when we first looked at pet-friendly city requirements, I did consult 2 rental managers and just kind of asked, is it a big deal? And I think both of their responses were that yes, there's always a need for pet-friendly housing, and it's not necessarily that the number of consumers wanting pet-friendly houses increases, it's the inventory that will allow pets generally tends to decrease. So when homes sell, when they're torn down and a new home is built, the reluctance to have pet-friendly rentals, kind of slips away. But with that being said, I think there are more options now in terms of boarding and home care. We've got a lot more folks in the community, whether it's through a business or on their own, that will do pet sitting of some type, whether in their home or at another facility. Then the Brandywine Valley has the Eastern Shore Pet Resort, which has become very popular for folks that are traveling or coming to the area. So it does kind of level out. But yeah, to answer your question, I think the demand for it isn't extremely higher than it has been in the past. It's just what we're able to provide. Yeah. But there is always a consistent demand. I think some folks have to make that choice to either leave their pet at home or board them.
Well, we certainly wouldn't leave ours.
Well, I received no complaints, concerns, letters all summer long from
I have just one little
anyone who
announcement.
said there's too many dogs next door, or the rental people with all the dogs are too loud. I didn't hear that this summer.
Didn't hear that.
No.
We lost one of our foxes. The one that lives along in front of the school, and I found him because the vultures got there before the city. And that was a joke.
I thought about that for a hot second, but
Consequently, bunnies, we've had an increase in bunnies. In fact, I've got 2 tunnels in my backyard, and so the bunnies have come back.
speaking of which, I saw a small fox on the way here on Hickman, sitting in
saw
the
what?
driveway, small
Oh.
fox.
Yeah.
We've had,
Munson, I'm sorry, Munson.
we've had
On the
2
way
small
over
ones
here,
on the
over here.
canal.
Sitting
small
in a
one?
driveway, yep, just hanging out.
Just adorable.
Yeah, really cute. I thought it was a dog. Of course, I stopped because I thought it was somebody's dog, and then upon
And then they look.
Yeah.
further look, he looks at me and he hightails it out of there.
Well, they don't seem to have the mange they had before. I don't know
No,
what
he
it
was
is.
beautiful. He was nice and fluffy, little guy.
Yeah, and we've got a small one running around in our yards that has a white tip on its tail. And that's when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's a dog.
Yeah.
Particularly because of this white tip, that just seemed unusual.
You tell the neighbors it's a dog.
Particularly the neighbors with the little dogs.
I think we're living with them. It
Oh,
seems
yeah,
better
yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I'm not hearing complaints.
I don't hear complaints about skunks or anything.
I mean, until they show
And
up
there
and walk in the
certainly
grotto
aren't enough
pizza, I think
skunks.
we're okay.
Got skunks, big skunks.
Well, any suggestions for when we should meet next?
Well, I said September, the last meeting, you said it was too long, so how about December?
December. December with a D, let's do
Are you
that.
still here?
I'm here. Sure,
Aren't you going away?
I
Oh, you
will.
go after Christmas.
I will, but I come back for meetings. I'd come back for you, Libby, if you want to meet.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Look at
Mondays still work best, Marcia? Do you like Mondays at 2 o'clock?
Mondays or Tuesdays?
Mondays or Tuesdays?
Agreed.
Okay,
Calendar,
December 2? December, no, let's not do the 9th. The commissioners meet that morning and you never know.
December.
The 2nd or the 16th, otherwise we're getting too much into the holiday. Maybe the 2nd?
16th is getting close to
Even
Christmas,
the
isn't it?
16th is
Yeah.
bumping into
Second sounds good.
the 2nd. All right.
Okay.
Are we good? 12/2, 2 p.m.?
12/2/2.
Yes.
0. Oh, no, 19.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Would our guests like to share anything? All right. Okay, nice to have you here. Thank you for coming. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? We are adjourned at 2:50 p.m. My gosh, we did this in less than an hour. Thank you all for your service, your efficiency. Oh, and I could have said this on the record. I guess we're still on, as long as the red light is on. All of you have agreed to continue on for another year. Thank you very much. And that includes Bob and Ray. So we will stay with the same committee. And I appreciate your good service.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say we should recruit a younger person, but Cheryl's it.
Well,
Oh.
I think another
Well, thank
younger
you.
person would be outstanding too, but
Well,
that's,
somebody better start breeding.
yeah, breeding, yes. Okay, no, we still are on. Live on camera until Ann gets up.
Great.
But very good meeting, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Libby. Maybe I won't see you tomorrow.
Christ, I hope so.
We've crossed paths every day for
3
3
days in a row.
Oh,
days,
wow.
so- and it's all been good. Enid,
Very
thank you for
special.
coming.
Is that walking or?
Is
that walking?
No, at events, at meetings or
Oh,
events.
oh,
Well,
oh.
yeah, and this weekend was a busy weekend for all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff.
well, and, you know, there was the picnic yesterday, the HOA picnic, Libby was there, she was at the Dems Jamboree event on Saturday afternoon, and I don't know if she was at anything else I was at, maybe. It was a busy weekend.
You carry Revolution around with
No,
you.
Libby brought that and
Just in
asked if
case.
I can use that for my cat at home, because she apparently can't.
I'm gonna check my computer, and I have a question for you once that little
Yeah,
break goes off.
sure.
It's totally unrelated to.
She said there's one left and she can't use this.
I wonder if she lost her cat.
I'm not sure.
I don't know how to turn that off.
No, we will, I thought Ann might be kind of watching. And she might be, but she might be very busy as well. I want to make sure I give her our notes approved, otherwise I walk out of here and I forget. Is that the only chair, Marcia, that came
Yeah,
in
I
from?
pulled it off.
The rest were all here, I think. Okay. Well, I don't know what happened to Ray. We missed him today.
Well, you probably got a bird call.
Well, that's probably true, but he's so good about texting, even when he's on the run. But he didn't send anything.
You gave a very nice bird lecture. Where was it?
Yeah, I've heard that their
At
programs
the library.
are really good.
All right, have a good one.
Okay, Marcia.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right. See you soon. Well, I'm not touching his equipment, so it's probably easier for me just to run downstairs. I'll be back.
Oh, yeah, no worries, I'm gonna put the finishing touches on this addendum, have it ready. Yeah, thank you.
It just was slow.
Yeah, that's all right. I just needed to update this. I had a settlement this morning that totally went south and.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, it kind of is, but luckily everybody's willing to work together and, I just have to type up a pre-occupancy agreement. Get everybody to agree to it.
When Ann gets up here and turns things off, she will want to turn lights off long
Okay.
thing. But, but if you want to chat for a few minutes, we go across the hall and then
Yeah,
into the meeting.
super quick, just a kind of thought thing. And it's funny, because it's something that Lily said, I'm like, yeah, I get it, like, it's very similar.
Okay.
Let me see this real quick.
You can probably stay online over there in that room.
Right, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I will,
Pulled in a bunch of directions, just like everybody else sometimes, it's hard to know.
yeah, he's a very busy guy, I know that.
I don't think I've seen him since he had his knee replaced.
No, I'm not sure I have either. Part of it's good news, I haven't had to call him for any
Yeah.
bird problems. That's it?
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't just make a copy.
I did, yeah.
You did, that
Yeah,
fast? Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Evan, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Evan, do you know Cheryl Crow?
Yeah.
Adjournment?
How are
Okay.
you? Good to
Good.
see you.
Yes, likewise.
Good. Well,
Thanks.
thank you. I didn't mean to
Absolutely.
interrupt you right now,
No,
but it's very helpful to have.
It helps when I'm thinking of it. each
Oh,
day,
yeah,
or else
I get
don't
it.
wanna risk
All right, Evan, thanks.
Yep.
He is an amazing young guy. I just asked him when I was downstairs telling Ann we're done.
Really?
I just said, you know that
Holy
recycling report you got?
smokes. I probably couldn't even
Can
turn
I-
the
can
computer
I-
on in that much time.
At some point, can I get a hard copy? Let's go out here and
Oh,
sit
sure.
over here for a minute. I said, you know, just anytime this week or something.
And he gave it to you in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Ann. I laid the approved minutes there for you, for your records. Thanks so much.
Sure.
I'll send you an email later.